Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I see we already have some people saying hello in the comments. Um, Today we are having a chat. Let me change this view a little bit so we can see more of our mentors. We're having a chat with some of our adult mentors today. We have 4 for you in this hour and 5 coming the next hour. So if you don't know what Pitch Wars is and you're just kind of like stumbling upon this video, welcome. Pitch Wars is an annual mentoring event where established authors and industry professionals mentor aspiring authors and do a full round of edits with their book, and that ends in an agent showcase. And you can find out more about that at pitchwars.org. There's a whole bunch of information on that website. So today we have mentor Lissa Mia Smith is handling the Pitch Wars account today. So you may see her comments coming through. If you're watching on Twitter, if you can, click through to YouTube. That's going to be the best way to participate in the conversation and ask questions and stuff. But if for some reason you can't click over to YouTube, Lissa will be able to bring your questions over if you want. Oh, Rob is in Orlando. Rob and I are in the same city. It's so weird. Okay. Okay, I'm going to have our mentors introduce themselves first. I'm Sarah. I'm on the board of directors. And I am not a mentor this year, but I host the video chats. And yeah, that's me. Anna?
Hi, I'm Anna. This is my second year mentoring in Pitch Wars, and it's now my favourite time of year except for Shark Week. I write rom-coms and I read pretty much everything, and I can't wait to see what you have for me this year.
Samantha, go ahead.
I'm Samantha Rajaram. I was a Pitch Wars mentee in 2018 and a mentor in 2019 and 2020. And I'm really excited to be back. And I write historical fiction, but I'm reading contemporary literary fiction as well as historical fiction.
All right, Ruby?
Hi, I'm Ruby. I write adult contemporary romance. I am co-mentoring for my second year with my amazing co-mentor, Rosie Bannon. Rosie and I are Pitch War 18 alums with Samantha, and we are mentoring adult romance this year.
And Courtney?
Hi, I'm Courtney, and I'm mentoring with Jenny L. Howe this year. I was a mentee last year in 2020. And Jenny was a mentee in 2016, and we are really excited to read all of your swooning stories.
All right, cool. Just a quick tech note. I can't tell if it's Samantha or Anna, but we're getting a little bit of echo when someone else talks from one of you. So if you could just mute when you're not talking, that would help a lot. Thank you. All right. I'm sorry, I didn't notice it. We were doing the chat before. All right, so y'all, everyone in the comments, feel free to start asking your questions. You can go ahead and start asking your questions for your mentors. We don't have any yet, so I'll ask one of my favorite ones, and one that seems to get asked in every chat anyway, is what is the process of you going through your Pitch Wars inbox look like? Like once you get access to it, once Gail gives you the go ahead, you know, how does that look like from beginning to picking your mentee?
I'll just jump in first. Generally, Rosie and I will just split half and half, whatever we get of whatever we've got, and we will usually start with the query and then the sample pages and then the synopsis. And obviously, that's just our process, and other mentors might be, you know, looking at other things, and no one process is right or wrong. It's just that's generally what works. Or I shouldn't even say that that's necessarily what Rosie does. That's what I do, because that's kind of like the best way for me to get introduced to your concept, get an idea of your voice, and then get an idea of your entire story and your pace and your structure and whatnot. And yeah, from there, we're almost always in constant contact. Rosie and I are kind of obsessed with each other and have like 8 different chats going on like that many different platforms. So we're in constant contact with each other about, you know, we love this and we love that, and making sure to always share back and forth. And we have a big spreadsheet that we communicate with, and that's how we sort of whittle down and make our selections for requesting full manuscripts. And once we request full manuscripts, we obviously both read them. We think it's really important that we both get eyes on everything so that we can get the most of the voice and be able to sort of like come back and meet about everything. And that's how we make our decisions.
I said I didn't like to call on people, but I will start. Okay.
Mine and Jenny's process is going to be really similar to Ruby's. It's our first year mentoring, but we've worked together for, going on 6 years now. So we're really close friends. We know each other's tastes. And so we're basically planning on dividing our submissions in half and reading through in order of query and then pages and then synopsis. We also have a spreadsheet ready to go. So yeah, that's how we plan on just dividing and conquering.
Yeah, very similar over here. I also put everything in a spreadsheet and I just live in that spreadsheet for the entire month. One thing I also do, I did last year and I'm planning to do this year, is to tweet something about every single submission that I get on Twitter. So if you submit to me and you're on Twitter, you might want to follow that hashtag. I think it's hashtag PWTeasers, and you can try and guess which one is yours. But they're so vague that you can't really tell, but it's a bit of fun guessing which one is your MS. Yeah, I'll live in my spreadsheet and I'll agonize and I'll message all the other mentors saying, how am I supposed to choose between all of these stories? And eventually I'll be forced to make a decision and cry about it, but it will all work out in the end.
I love that that's part of your like official process.
It's definitely the official part of the process. Marianne Marlowe is like I moan to her continually throughout the entire month about how unfair it is that I can only pick one. She's like my emotional support.
As that leaves me, I also do the spreadsheet, and although I hate spreadsheets generally, but I've found that is pretty much the only way to make this manageable. I do also look at word count a little bit. Anything that's like 110,000 plus, I really don't feel like I have time to read something that long. I'm fairly limited. I've got 3 kids and a full-time job and all this stuff. So I'm looking at that. And also within the genres that I'm mentoring in, a really long book it's less likely to make it, especially as a debut. That's my sense. So that is one thing I also take into consideration.
All right. I realized I forgot to say something at the beginning. So we won't be taking questions that are very specific to your manuscript. So if you have any questions like that, I do suggest that you ask them in whatever manner the mentors have said on their wish list. Most of them will say at the end of their wish list how you can contact them about questions, or you can ask on that hashtag Ask Mentor Twitter chats, mainly just because we have limited time today and we want to make sure that we focus on the things that can help the most people. There's a question here from Aaron. I'm going to address it real quickly. I don't think we have any thriller specialists on the chat, right? So it was, do you think that legal thrillers fit within the general thriller genre, or are they considered their own category? I'm not sure why it matters, like why specifically you're asking this, but legal thrillers are just a subgenre of thriller. I don't think we specifically have legal thriller listed on the drop-down menu for genres, so you can just choose thriller and then in the query letter specify that it's a legal thriller. All right. This is interesting from Rob. With the growing number of submissions to Pitch Wars, will the query hook have more importance than usual? So maybe talk a little bit too about kind of how you evaluate a submission, like what you're looking at. I know some people will read the pages first before even reading the query letter. So, how does your decision process go?
I can jump in. I do start with the query, but even if it's a complete mess, I'll always read the pages because queries are really hard and even the best writers can struggle with them. So for me, it's not too important. I mean, I want to see that someone has made an effort, that they've looked up what a query is and tried to do one. But the pages are what it comes down to. It's always about the writing in the end.
Yeah, I would agree with Anna that I think that for the most part, we are looking at voice. Like the voice really has to jump out at us. And obviously, you know, a great hook is awesome. And my co-mentor Rosie is like really tuned into plot and what makes a great hook and that kind of thing. But you know, at the end of the day, like you can retell the same story with a totally new voice and make it like something completely different. So I don't think that the number of submissions are really going to affect that, because of the right voice is going to shine through to the right mentor.
Yeah, I will say I've been hosting these chats for, I think this is the 3rd year now, and I can't speak for all mentors, obviously, but most mentors, I feel like, unless it's just like totally not what they want at all, like it's on their do not send list, they're still gonna probably read the pages, even if the query letter is kind of a messy. That's not to say don't like try on your query letter, of course, but you know, don't, if you've already edited it like 16 times, just stop. It's okay. All right. Anybody else want to add anything to that before? Okay, go ahead. Oh my God, Ruby's cup is so cute. I'm sorry.
Well, let me see. Cute. Your query will get me really excited to read your pages. I'm going to read your pages anyway. But yes, querying is definitely a different kind of craft than manuscripting. So I'm always going to read your pages, but I would love to see, you know, the general idea of your premise, what your characters are like, and to get excited for the pages I'm about to read.
All right. Anna is answering the call of her cat, which I totally understand. I had to do that the other day too. All right. If the manuscript you're planning to submit has the same tropes or a similar premise to an already or soon to be released by a mentor, should you not sub to them?
I think as long as it's not in there, we don't want this on our wish list, or sorry, we don't want this on our wish list, then it doesn't matter. Like what, you know, don't think too hard about, you know, what mentors have coming up, and just look at the wish list and use that as your guideline.
Yeah, I was going to talk about this in my wish list, but it was already longer than some novels, so I didn't. But I think in that situation, I would definitely say to you, this book is a bit similar to something I've written or am writing. And if you're not comfortable with that, then totally respect that. You don't need to send me the whole MS. But for me, it wouldn't be a problem as long as it wasn't for you.
All right. Yeah, Ruby, that's a good point. I feel like most mentors will say specifically, like, if you have a book that's this, I won't take it because of I'm writing a book similar to it or whatever. All right. So Svelte, I'm going to ask you to ask that question of the mentors you're interested in rather than on the video chat. All right. Alicia asks, do you like a more mysterious query or a more detailed query? How long do y'all think queries can be? I know there was a lot of conversation about this the other day on the hashtag.
I'll take this one.
Okay, yeah.
I'm by no means an expert on query letters. In fact, I hate writing them, so I'll just say that. But I have read, and my own experience has been, it shouldn't be more than a page, so like a little over 300 words. You have to be really succinct, and so that is the challenge. So like everyone else has been talking about, I really go straight to the manuscript. I mean, I kind of look at the query letters for some context, but it's really, for me also, it's about the writing. But, I'd say it should be short. And you're thinking in terms of how agents look at these, they get a huge amount of these query letters and they're just looking for the hook. Like they just want to find it right away. And so the shorter, the better.
I would also add that, I agree 100%, like shorter the better. 300 words, and the hook is what's most important. And so I wouldn't necessarily say mysterious. I want to know like who, and I want to know why, and I want to know what's important to them. But you obviously have to stick that into a little small space. And you can leave the details for the synopsis. Then you can, tell me everything and let me know how it ends.
Sarah, is there a limit to the word count they can have for the submission, for the query part?
That I don't know where that came from. As someone said it somewhere, and people have been asking us that for a while. That's why we always say get all your info at pitchwars.org or on the Pitchwars Twitter account, because we there is a character limit on the form just to prevent abuse, but no reasonable or even slightly over reasonable query letter is going to hit that character limit. So
okay,
yeah.
So my advice would be your typical query letter should aim to be around 300 words. For the sake of Pitch Wars, do your very best. The things that I am always looking for in a query letter and what I have found to be a common structure is who is your character? What do they want? What stops them from getting what they want? How do they plan to work around that? And what's the consequence if they fail? That's like basically, the form of it. And then you do your little short bio at the end. So that's what I'm looking for, and to be as specific as you can so that I can see what your story is about. But again, it is a very different craft. And for the sake of Pitch Wars, we're going to pick your book based on more than just your query. So that would be my advice.
All right. Alicia asks, when do mentors request full manuscripts? So I can give the technical answer and then everyone else can kind of give their personalized answer. So mentors can request full manuscripts anywhere from a couple hours after a submission window closes up until basically right before mentors or mentees are announced. Do y'all have a strategy? Like, do you kind of request as you go, or do you hold off and request all at once, or how do you know?
Yeah, so last year I went straight to Falls, and there were so many good submissions that I ended up reading 30 full manuscripts in the month, and it nearly killed me. So this year my strategy is to request partials first, just to keep my own sanity, and I don't do them all at once. Like Sarah said, I made my first request a couple of hours after I got into the inbox, and the last one like a few days before the deadline. So for me, if you don't get a request straight away, please don't lose heart. I saw that on the Twitter a lot last year. We were 2 weeks into the sub period and people were saying, well, I haven't been chosen for Pitch Wars. What do I do now? And I'm thinking, hang on, I've still got, 45 manuscripts that I want to read here. So yeah, that's my strategy this year, is to go partials first and then Falls if I reach the end and think, oh, I want to read more. I'll probably still end up with 30, but at least I'm running the chance this time.
Anybody else want to share? Courtney?
I have a feeling that Jenny and I will request as soon as we can, just so we have more time to read, but that could change.
I think Rosie and I are the same. We'll probably request as soon as we can. Anna, you're wild that you read 30 books in a month. That's amazing. But yeah, we're gonna request as soon as we can, but we most likely will do batch requests, like groups, a few groups at a time. But we're kind of wild too, so who knows? I don't know what's gonna happen.
In my case, for the last 2 years that I've mentored, and I think it's partly a function of the genre that I'm mentoring in, I don't think I got as many submissions as other genres get. And so I, get through them fairly quickly, and I always ask for fulls. And I pretty much asked for all of them pretty quickly in one batch. And I was certainly not reading 30 or 45 manuscripts. That's amazing.
Excuse me. I feel like mine kind of varied every year I mentored. So even though they're like saying some of the stuff now, like it may change. I do know some mentors. It's honestly tends to be the science fiction mentors, which is weird, where they'll be like, I'm only requesting 7 manuscripts. And so they won't request until they read everything. Whereas some mentors will just like request as they go. Like if they like it, they request it. So it really varies quite a bit. All right, so Lisa brought us a question from Twitter that's actually answered on the FAQ page. So I'm just going to point y'all to that real quick. It's pitchwars.org/submission-FAQ. But it is, my first chapter is really long. Do you still want the whole thing, or would it be the best to just send the first 10 pages of it? So the FAQ says send the first chapter or first 10 pages, whichever is longer, period. All right. We have another content warning question. Again, please ask the mentors, individually, privately. We have another question about memoir. So none of our adult mentors put memoirs on their wish list. We don't focus on memoirs. Pitch Wars is focused on fiction. Memoirs has always been kind of a like, if a mentor wants it, then we will take it, but it's definitely not a priority of ours. So that's just not the focus. We have to narrow our focus a little bit. So that's one of the things. Okay, we have another question that's answered on the FAQ. So it's about prologues. So what it says in the form is, it's on here somewhere. I can't find it right now. But basically, if it's a true prologue, we usually say send the first chapter. If it's like part of the story and takes place in the same timeline as the story, it's probably not a prologue, and then you should submit it as the first chapter. Okay. What's the recommended way to handle a novel that takes more than one chapter, 10 pages to build to the action? Like slow burn, but not romance.
So I don't think you necessarily need to have action in order to present the reader with a problem, the problem that your character needs to solve or the problem that they're facing. I don't think that just like you don't have to necessarily insert conflict right away in order for that character to be dealing with something they need to overcome. So I'm not quite sure if I'm really answering the question the way that I think you're asking it, but yeah, I think that essentially what I would think, I know I'm a romance mentor, but even if I wasn't writing romance, I would be thinking about how to present my reader with the thing that's going to make me want to turn the page is seeing that my character is presented with a problem and that they're stuck or that they have a plan for how to fix it. And chances are it's probably not going to go well the first time because otherwise it'd be a short book, that kind of thing. So we don't need to like jump into action necessarily right away.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. You just want to give us some kind of question that we want to see answered. And it doesn't have to be a huge question like, will they survive? It can just be a really small thing like, how are they going to handle this job interview that they're really nervous about? Or, just some kind of uncomfortable or tense situation. How are they going to deal with that? And it can be a really small thing because we've all been there. So yeah, I don't think you have to handle it in any kind of special way. Just let the story tell itself how it should be told.
All right, I did want to mention because I've heard Mary Revenant Cole talk about this a lot on the oh my gosh, what is that podcast called? Writing Excuses podcast. And she talks about, because like a lot of people I think get this misinformation, start with action, right? And that doesn't mean like start with a huge fight scene or like a major conflict or whatever. It can just be something that is compelling. It doesn't even have to be the major conflict of the book. And she talks a lot about kind of like the query and response. You're basically introducing questions that will be answered later, and that's what keeps the pages turning. But yeah, I definitely recommend writing excuses for anyone who has questions about this kind of stuff. Okay. Samantha, is 97,000 words too much? We'll just answer that quickly since it's a yes or no question.
I think that would be okay. It's a little on the longer side, but I would, if the writing was super compelling, I would probably jump on that. Yeah.
All right. For mentors looking for women's fiction plus a romantic arc, how should the genre split look? I'm struggling a little bit with the specifics of this cross genre.
So I think when it comes to the romantic arc, the question is, will they end up together? So if that is a major question central to your plot, then I think that would classify it as a strong romance.
Yeah, I think I just want to make sure I wasn't muted. Yeah, I think it varies quite a bit. Is how much romance can be in women's fiction is a little bit or a lot, and so definitely make sure you're reading in your genre and seeing what other people are doing. Should the query be the same as what we've been sending to agents? Yeah, we say all the time, your query should look almost exactly like the query you should send to a literary agent. So Rob asked about mentors wish list excluding manuscripts with sexual assault. And he's asking, does this refer to description of the assault on the page or if it's only reference? I feel like most mentors have clarified that in their wish list. Like they've said, it's okay if it's mentioned, but it's not on the page, or they say not at all or whatever. I feel like most mentors were pretty clear about that. But if any of y'all do any of y'all have that? Want to clarify yours?
No, I would just say I saw some discussion earlier that if a mentor has asked for a content warning or something that they don't want, please don't message them with details of the assault that's in your manuscript. Just keep it very general. Like you mentioned that you don't want assault. Is it okay if this is off page? But please don't describe anything that could upset or trigger somebody.
Yeah, I got that one year. Someone DM'd me and was like, this is exactly explicitly what happens. Is that okay? Why would you do that? I said no sexual assault. Like, no. All right. Yeah, it was a really bad day. So please don't do that. Oh, this is a good question. Is it valid to comp a fiction to a nonfiction book if the plot revolves around a current cultural predicament?
I love nonfiction, so I say yes. If it's relevant and it tells us something about the tone or the content of your novel, then it sounds valid to me. But also I know nothing about comp, so probably don't listen to me.
I would say I've honestly never given it much thought before, but I like the idea. And like, I mean, you know, we will comp things in terms of like my Pitch Wars novel Hot Copy was not like comped to the Me Too movement, but it was relevant to the Me Too movement, and that was something that I used in my query letters. And it was something that we used when we went on submission to editors. So like to provide like cultural context, I think that that can be really important and really helpful.
Yeah, you can.
Okay. Yeah. I was just going to say that with my mentee last year, one of the comps we used was a film, an actually fairly old film, and I think it worked pretty well. And so I think these notions that you're really confined to a specific genre when you're doing comps are a little bit more porous, I think, than maybe we assume. And particularly if it's like a nonfiction book that is just like a huge hit, I think that could probably be compelling.
Yeah, and to echo that, I agree. You can use film, you can use songs. I've seen so many different things comped as long as it's relevant to your story. And it also can be fun to note the specific element in that story you're comping to.
Yeah, I love nonfiction. I think if you have, a particularly compelling, like especially if, you know, if your main character is interested in some sort of movement or whatever, I think that would be a fun comp. All right. Are any of you accepting memoirs? Okay. Continue with comps. We always get a lot of questions on comps with these chats. How much emphasis is placed on comps? If the story has comps to a book movie you love, are you more likely to request?
See, this is why, sorry, I'm jumping in again. This is why I'm not a huge fan of them, because I think if it's a movie or a book that you don't like, you think, oh, I don't really want to read another one of those. And if it's something that you love, you just get such high expectations. So I don't really get all the fuss about comps. They don't really work for me. But having said that, one of the manuscripts I requested last year was Jurassic Park times The Truman Show. And I was like, I've got to have this right now. Like, if it had been written in crayon Comic Sans, I think I still would have requested it. So I'm a complete hypocrite. But I would say don't focus too much on them, especially for pitch wars, because your mentor can help you get those right. Yeah, I just say worry more about the writing than the comps. But if you have Jurassic Park,
I'm just noticing your shirt. It says your name. I'm like obsessed with it. That's amazing. Okay, and comps. I was gonna say, shoot. Oh my god, I forgot what I was gonna say. All right, somebody else jump in. I'll remember.
Well, I was gonna say I'll probably jump immediately on a comp of something that I love. I'm gonna actually use Courtney as an example because actually, well, I guess it's like, yeah. So basically, Courtney last year was a Pitch Wars mentee, and Courtney submitted to Rosie and I, and Courtney like essentially used the comp or the premise of like a Hallmark movie, but making it queer, and that like just we were like gripping the table for it. We really loved like that concept. So it's like I find that comps can be a really great way to like get the message and the premise of your book across in like as limited word count as possible, right? But at the same time, if you don't have comps, or if you don't think that, you know, you can find like the right set of comps to fit it in, like we're not gonna like not pay attention to it if it's not there. Like it's, you know, as Anna is, everybody is saying, like it's about the book itself. It's about the voice. So don't be worried if you don't have them.
I'll just chime in and say that for my own book, when I was querying agents, I did not have comps. I could not come up with a comp. I'm not particularly good at comps. So that was a challenge for me. And both of my mentees did have comps, and they picked wonderful comps. But like in the end, like I'll just be like, oh, that's a cool book. I love that book. But, you know, ultimately it's really about the writing.
Yeah, I think comps can be a quick way to hook someone, but they're never make or break really, unless it's like you just absolutely hate like all the comps that they have. Like if someone messaged me and was like comping Hemingway, I'd be like, no. But that's just my personal preference. A lot of people love Hemingway, right? But I will say, when I was sent an email about this book, White Trash Warlock, the pitch the publisher sent me, I looked it up. The headline said, Shannon McGuire meets Supernatural, and I literally, my whole body just went like numb, and I was like, yes, send that to me. And then I looked even further, and someone said it's a gay Dresden Files, and I was like, I need this book, right? So like that's what comps can do for you, but like it's not just because you don't have great comps doesn't mean like you're dead in the water. All right, so EW asked, does the query letter word limit include or exclude the bio? So the 300 words y'all were talking about. I will say that's a guideline, not a limit. But I think, yeah, like we're talking about the entire query letter, right? Yeah, okay. Is it expected that the synopsis match the voice of your manuscript?
I think the main goal of the synopsis is to show you understand the narrative arc of your story. So the plot arc of your story. I would like to see, okay, X, Y, Z happens, and that's understood, and it's clearly laid out. It doesn't really have to be flashy, voicey. It can be however you feel.
Yeah, cool. What are you looking for in an author bio? So the author bio section of the query letter.
It's nice to have something interesting about you, just because it helps sort of strike up a conversation if I write to you to ask for the manuscript, but in the nicest possible way. Nothing else really matters. You could have published 10 books, but if this one, I don't fall in love with that, I wouldn't pick it just because you've got a really wonderful history. And likewise, if you've got no writing credentials at all, it doesn't matter. It's all about the writing. But it's cool to add something about you that I can ask you about if we talk.
I'll add that also. I think adding some information about your own identity as it affects the type of novel that you're writing, I think can be useful to know. As a writer of color, that's definitely something that I think about when I'm writing, and as a queer writer, that's definitely something I think about. So that's just one thing that could, I think, enhance a little bit the query letter, but just as Anna said, like that's not the only thing I'm looking for. Not even close. It's really the writing.
If you're looking for some direction on what to put in your bio, if you have any sort of like personal life experience that relates to your story, as far as maybe your career, like my main character is an event planner and I have a little bit of experience in my career with event planning, just as an example. If you're looking for something, because I know it can be sometimes difficult to come up with something to put in that closing line.
Yeah, and if you're a member of any professional groups or even critique groups, you can say that as well. That's a good thing to include. Rob asked, is there a cap on how many submissions a mentor can receive? No, much to some mentors to say. So there's no need to like rush to submit early or anything. You won't run out of spots. Is it true that comps, I told y'all you get a lot of questions about comps, need to be for works that are 5 years old? I will say that's a general guideline, but like there's exceptions to every rule. So like, just keep that in mind. Anything I want to add?
I remember what I wanted to say. So comps, a lot of time when you're querying to agents, are going to be used to pitch your book to editors to see kind of where it falls in the marketplace. So don't put too much stress if you can't think of anything. Your query doesn't need it. Like Ruby was saying, my query said for fans of Hallmark, but steamy and queer. Like I didn't even comp a book. It was just giving you an aesthetic. If you want to give an aesthetic, that's fun too.
All right. Yeah, I think when I queried, I didn't comp a book, but I comped a couple authors because it was like a very voicey, fast-paced urban fantasy. So I was like going for that. Erin asked, in a previous live, a mentor said she would select a manuscript based on how much she thought she could help that manuscript. Is this true for you? What makes you feel that you can be helpful for a manuscript? I'm going to add on the question I usually ask. What are some of the things that you most like to work on in a book? Who wants to go first?
I'll start. So yes, so we will select based on how much we think we could help a manuscript. Essentially, we had this last year that there was a manuscript we got that we really liked, and we even requested the full, but we were like, it's pretty ready, so we don't think there's much help what we can do for it. And so we wanted to give the spot that we had to someone that we thought had, needed a bit more help. So that's a good thing, first of all. And for me, the things that we think that we can help the most with are pacing, conflict, like creating, one of the really big things for romance, especially, is like creating an external and internal conflict that are sort of feeding off of each other. I mean, I shouldn't just say that's, solely a romantic plotline issue. I think that feeds into most fiction, but, finding ways that we can make that, braid that in. And I think both Rosie and I are always ready to, I don't want to say improve, but make steamier moments steamier. So that's where our focus is.
Yeah, similar really. I want something that I can take to agentable or publishable level within the time period that we have. And I'd say that my strengths were pacing, structure, character motivation, and increasing tension. If you get an edit letter from me, it will mention tension approximately 4,000 times, because that's just everything in a novel. So I'm probably looking for something where, it needs just a bit more oomph to get it there.
I know for Jenny and I, we are very confident in the romance structure. It's something we feed off of. So that is a strength of ours. We're going to help you structure your romance if it needs that. Something that will draw us to your manuscript. It's hard because it's so subjective. It has to be something that we feel we have a vision for, and we may not know until we read it. But I think what might hook at least myself right off the bat would be a strong voice from your character, and really getting a strong sense of who your character is.
For me, this is not super helpful, but it's almost hard for me to articulate whether I know what I'm going to help someone with. I just kind of know it when I see it. And last year I read some really wonderful manuscripts, but I just didn't get a clear sense something is not quite working, but I can't quite figure out what it is. And then I came upon my mentee Milo's book, and I just knew immediately, this is how I see it coming together, and it's going to rock. And so, and he was completely on board with the things that I was suggesting. So, it worked out really well, but I don't really know going into it if I'm going to be able to fix it, or not even fix it, just figure it out, what the issue is. So I don't know if that's terribly helpful, but that is kind of what my approach is.
Yeah, I will say sometimes it can change too. I came into Pitch Wars as a publicist, and so I felt like for a long time my strength was taking a book that wasn't quite marketable enough and making it more marketable with some tweaks. I didn't really do major changes. And then the year I picked Limar, I was like, all right, we're going to cut 80 pages and we're going to add. It was just a total departure from anything I'd done before. And I don't know if that was my growth as a writer and editor, or just that manuscript just clicked with me or whatever. But I can definitely change and vary. I say the answer to every Pitch Wars question is it depends. So okay, Mary asked, should we hint at or spoil a big midpoint twist in the query if it changes who the main character thinks the antagonist is?
I'm going to jump in and say, bring us right up to that question of what happens if they fail. Anything else, as far as if there's a big plot twist, you can leave for the synopsis.
I agree.
All right. One line I have seen in a query letter that kind of hints at something like this is Mary finds out that John isn't who she thought he was, or something like that. So you can do that too. All right. I am so anxious about getting the genre wrong because I don't want to waste the mentor's time. Should I be? I'm just going to say, if your umbrella genre is correct, then don't worry about some of the specifics. But if any of y'all have anything you want to add.
You're not wasting our time. It's such a privilege to read all of your pages, seriously. don't be afraid of that. As long as you're respecting what we say we really don't want for whatever reason, then please don't sweat it. We can help you pin the genre down. It's hard. Yeah.
Also, too, I want to say this is about you and your story. If you're looking at the wish lists and your story lines up and you feel like it would be a good match, go with your gut. But this is about you, and like, how many times in our adult life do we get a time in our life that it's about us? So like, embrace it.
All right. Romance mentors, can we clarify erotica versus erotic writing? Is a no to erotica also a no to erotic romance, I'm assuming, during the eggplant scenes? That's a great way to ask that question.
Okay, so yeah, so I'm assuming that we're saying like erotica versus erotic romance, and if that's what we're saying, then erotica okay, so actually the first thing I'm going to say is like double fact check my answer. This is what I perceive the truth to be, but erotica does not have to have a happily ever after. Erotic romance still has to have a happily ever after, or happy for now. That's my understanding. But yeah, that might require just like some more Googling or going straight. Like I don't consider myself an erotic romance writer really, or erotica. Like I might try to dabble, but I'm certainly not, I'm not the best person to ask, I guess. So.
And also, if this means having a graphic sex scene in a romance novel, that's fine with us. That's just how you write your sex scene. So that's cool.
Yeah, I think there is a lot of confusion between erotic and on-the-page graphic sex scenes. And erotica, the thing that I heard years ago that makes the most sense to me is in erotica, the sex is vital to the plot. Like the sex drives the plot forward in a very significant way. So there's your difference. Okay, so we have a question from Twitter. What's your best advice for someone entering their first pitch wars?
I think celebrate yourself because you wrote a book and you're amazing. And even if you don't get into pitch wars, you're like on the precipice of an amazing community. And regardless of if you're in it or not, you should take advantage of that community because you're most likely going to find people that you're going to, talk to for the rest of your writing life. So go you, good job. And that's it.
Yeah, and entering in itself is a huge act of self-love and bravery. So when you hit that button, go celebrate, like do something to celebrate because it's huge. It's huge. You did that.
Yeah, all of that, and don't self-reject. You're going to start feeling all sort of doubts that, oh, I'm never going to get in. What's the point? Just do it. You can't win it if you're not in it. But do treat the goal as meeting other writers and getting your support network rather than getting in. If you get in, it's a bonus. But yeah, but don't self-reject. We get mad when you do that.
When I applied in 2018, I wasn't entirely sure what it was. And so I just wanted to give it a shot. And for me, it was great because it forced me to get my manuscript as ready as possible to just have this deadline ahead of me and really think like, okay, I need to get all this stuff done. And I needed that motivation. So, maybe think of it as a tool towards getting your materials like ready, to go out to agents regardless.
Yeah, I'm sorry, one more thing. Once you enter, maybe have a plan for what you're going to do next, because that can be really helpful. I know it was for my mental health. Like, okay, I'm going to take this month and read a bunch of books. And then if I don't get in, I'm going to query them. So having a plan can be helpful.
I just wanted to highlight this comment. Rain said, I made my best writing friends thanks to Pitch Wars last year. Even though I didn't get in, I'll always be thankful for that. We love hearing that. Now I have to scroll back up and find the next question. Sorry. Okay. Annie asked, do the mentors choose based on what is marketable, what interests them, or a combination of both?
I'm going to choose something that I think deserves to be published, whether it's in like a trendy genre or whether I think it would be a really hard sell. That doesn't really come in for me. It's just something that I think is a great story that should be out there.
I'll piggyback on what Anna's saying. With my mentee last year, Marlowe wrote an amazing trans historical fiction novel, and I read it and was just so enthralled that I'm like, I will move mountains to get this book, to agents. And that's what it is. It's like I fall in love with the book, and so you just want to help it in any way that you can. So I'm not thinking about what's marketable at all. I'm just thinking with my heart.
And also, I think it's also very hard for us to know what is marketable. Like, there are trends that are popular right now, but I, as an author, don't have the forecast internally of what's going to be popular tomorrow. So if we fall in love with it, we fall in love with it.
All right. Just want to make sure y'all didn't have anything else to add before we go on. So we talked about the timeliness of comps already. So if you missed that, make sure you go back and rewind to watch that. Let's see. So Cynthia asked, should you self-identify in bios? I think this is referring to Samantha said earlier. I will say the official Pitch Wars stance is we absolutely do not require it. You're not required to if you don't feel comfortable. If you feel 100% comfortable, then you're allowed to, like you're welcome to, of course. But we definitely don't want to make anyone feel like they have to out themselves in any way to submit to Pitch Wars. So any other comments before we? Okay, cool. Arian asked, who do we need to address our query letters to since we don't send the submission to mentors directly? Dear mentor is perfect. That's what we prefer. We prefer you not to personalize queries. If there is something that this will probably be our last question with this group. If there's something that we have in mind already that we might need work, but we need help or don't know how to do it, do we mention that in the query or synopsis or leave it out? I will say we had this conversation a couple days ago on another chat. I can't remember which one, but so make sure you go back and watch those as well. But I'm gonna let y'all chime in too.
I would say I never want to say like something that's going to be like too concrete, but I would say probably leave it out. And if we're interested, we're going to ask you, like, when we, want to see your full manuscript, we're going to send you like a list of questions, which maybe I should have mentioned earlier. Like, you're going to get a long list of questions from us. Sorry. And we'll ask you there, like, where do you think you need help? What do you envision? So that's your opportunity to do that then.
Anybody else want to chime in?
I would say that, again, treat this as though you are pitching your book to an agent, and you would not want to highlight stuff that's wrong with your book. So, that's supposedly why we're here. So we're going to read your manuscript and come back with, feedback for you. And so I would say I would suggest not doing that.
And that might be just another form of self-rejecting, so don't do that.
I was going to say, like, anyone who's taken a sales class, like, you don't mention the reason why someone doesn't want to buy something when you're trying to get them to buy something. And so it's just like, it's a subconscious thing. It's like a psychological subconscious response. When someone tells you their book isn't good, like you're likely to believe them. But then the other part of it is like, maybe the mentor disagrees with you and thinks that something else is what needs work. and that could be a great experience for you after you've had that conversation. But if you put that in your query letter, it seems to kind of close the conversation right off the bat. And so you want to kind of leave the conversation open. And most mentors will ask if they request the full questions like that. Yeah. All right, let me check the time. Okay, Al asked if you're imagining a visual illustration for each chapter, how should you notate that? I'm going to say, like, I don't think it matters. Like, the book is the most important thing. Whether or not it has an illustration at the beginning of each chapter isn't going to make a difference in whether a mentor chooses you or not. But if any of y'all want to chime in, I don't know anything about illustrations in adult books. No? Okay.
If it makes it to publication, you're not going to have much control over any of that anyway. Like, I will say one of the scariest moments in getting my book out was just, are they going to give me some cheesy cover? And I was really happy with what I got, but I was super nervous, like on pins and needles. So
yeah. Okay, Krista, we answered this question earlier, so make sure you go back and watch that if you haven't, whether or not you read the submitted pages or stop at the query. And I think that's all we have time for. I'm trying to see if there's like a question we can answer quickly, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to have each of the mentors close us out with their top query letter tip and also where we can find them online. And we'll just go around the clock. So we'll start with Anna.
Focus on the conflict, any kind of conflict, internal, external, small or big, just focus on that. And if there are dinosaurs, please mention them.
Samantha.
I would say don't worry too much about comps. Certainly if you're submitting to me, it's not always that helpful or crucial.
And Anna, you didn't say where to find you online.
Oh, I mostly hang around on Twitter, and my username is Anna Kaling, not Anasaurus, unfortunately.
Samantha.
I am on Twitter and Instagram at samantha.r.reader on Twitter and Samantha Reader on Instagram, and my website is my fullname.com.
All right, Courtney.
Be specific. And then also a lot of places you can look to sort of get tons of examples of query letters are the back of book covers, the summaries on Goodreads, the inside book flap. Many times they may have taken an author's query and made that into the book summary. Like, that actually happens. So that is just a plethora of ways you can look to see structure, how to layer in voice. And also the Pitchworks resource page has a ton of really great advice on how to structure your query.
And Ruby. Oh, wait, Courtney, where can we find you online?
Oh, yeah. Twitter, Instagram at Court_KAE, and then CourtneyKBooks.com.
Read the submission guidelines. Is my tip. Read, because they're different for every agent. So read the submission guidelines, and I'm going to say this really gently, y'all. Don't think that you're the exception to the rule in terms of just submission guidelines or wish lists or anything like that. They're there for a reason. And you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Ruby Barrett Wright. And I just started a TikTok, and I'm Ruby. Wait, what? Oh no. I'm Ruby.
Did you reply to my tweet earlier?
No.
Oh, okay.
Okay. I just looked it up on my phone.
I know, I'm looking.
So follow me on TikTok because I don't have any followers yet. Don't let the kids know I'm there. I'm like, hey, fellow kids.
Yeah, I asked everyone to send me their TikToks today, so I didn't know if you had replied.
Yeah, I actually saw that. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Cool. Well, thank y'all so much for joining us, and we're going to say goodbye to this set of mentors and bring on the next set of mentors. So bye, y'all, and bye one at a time, and then we'll bring on everyone else. I'm just going to give it a second because as the other mentors are closing out, the screen jumps around. and I find I click on the wrong thing. So we're going to add everyone here. All right. Hello. Hi, y'all.
Hello.
Hi.
Nikki, are you able to turn your camera and mic on? Just want to make sure before we get started. All right. So, yeah, perfect.
I am. Hey, y'all.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Is it weird?
Yes.
No, you're good. All right. So we're going to start. I'm going to ask each of you to introduce yourself, just kind of like say what you write, who you are, maybe what you do if you for a day job, if you want to mention that, and then also kind of your history with Pitch Wars. So we'll go around the clock. We'll start with Marianne.
Hi, I'm Marianne Marlowe, and I write contemporary romance, rom-com, with a little bit of sometimes I veer into a little bit women's fiction, but not much. I'm currently working I work in computer programming, sort of, we'll say a large umbrella. And I forgot, is there another question? Is that it?
Pitch Wars history.
Oh, my Pitch Wars history. Yeah. So I've been doing this since the dawn of time. And yeah, I love this community. They'll have to pull me away screaming and kicking, and yeah, that's me.
Yeah, I think Marianne's been around as long as I have, maybe.
No, you've been around longer, but
Maybe
like
just
a couple of years. I was a mentee in 2014, and I've been
okay. So yeah, a couple of years.
I've been a mentor ever since.
Cool. All right, Farah.
I'm Farah Heron.
Farah, sorry.
Oh, that's fine. Absolutely. I don't mind either one. But I write rom-com for adults and then for YA as well, for teenagers. And this is my job. I don't have a day job. I have kids and cats. But I've never been a mentee, but this is my third year mentoring, and I'm super excited. I have a co-mentor this year, Samantha Patel, and she was my first mentee, so I'm super excited to work with her. We've been very good friends since Pitch Wars. I don't remember what year it was, 2018. So we've been very good friends since then, and this year we're mentoring together.
We'll do Alexandria next.
Hi, I'm Alexandria. I was a Pitch Wars mentee in 2017. This is my first year mentoring. It was a really great experience, so I'm looking forward to mentoring for the first time. I write adult contemporary romance, queer rom-coms mostly.
Is it me? Hi everyone, I'm Vaishnavi Patel. I write adult science fiction fantasy. Mostly I'm on the fantasy side, some speculative, and I'm co-mentoring with Sarah Mughal this year. We were both mentees 2019-2020. And so we were mentors together then. We skipped a year. We both were getting agents, trying to figure all of that out. And now we're back to mentor, and we're very excited.
Hey, everyone. I'm Nikki Payne. I am a first-time mentor and also a first-time mentee last year. I was class of 2020, and I loved it so much I came back twice. Once, first, I don't know words. I am co-mentoring with Regina Black, and I write contemporary romance. And there's another question. My day job, I'm an anthropologist, and I work in like tech. And there was another question. Is there?
I think you covered your Pitch Wars history.
Look at that! I did it.
Yeah.
I did it.
Can I pipe in and say I forgot to add that I'm co-mentoring this year with Laura Elizabeth, who was my first mentee, by the way.
Cool. All right. Wow, a lot of you are. I mean, at least two of you mentoring with your first mentee. That's cool. All right, I'm trying to find where we were in the questions. Okay, actually, let's ask this question since we talked about with the last mentors, but y'all may have something to add too. Do you always read the submitted pages, or do you stop at the query if it doesn't interest you? For those of our new mentors, obviously, just kind of predict what you might do.
I always read them. I do read I have a system where I read the query, then the pages. I don't always read the synopsis, especially if I decide I want to read the book. I don't like to be spoiled, so I sometimes never read the synopsis. I might read it if I have a concern, if there's something in the query that I'm like, oh, is that what's going to happen? Then I might read the synopsis. So I don't always read those, but I always read the pages.
I always read the pages.
I haven't before, but I feel like I will always read the pages because I had a notoriously really terrible query, and I know that my mentors did the extra thing and read the pages as well, and they were pleasantly surprised. And I'll just always give people the benefit of the doubt. If querying isn't your strength, that's always something that can be built up.
Yeah, I agree. Sarah and I have both mentored for other programs before, and we always read the pages because, like other people have said, writing a query is a skill that's not necessarily doesn't necessarily have a high degree of overlap with being able to write and tell a story. So we can always help you figure out how to write a query. So we're going to read those pages.
Yeah, it's definitely my plan to read the pages in addition to the query, echoing what everyone else said. Query writing is a different skill set completely. I will read the query, then the pages, and then the synopsis.
All right, perfect. Rain asked, how do you feel about mentoring someone who is new to their genre, not super familiar with trends, comps, but willing to learn?
That's not a problem for me. I won't probably know that about you until we're deep in the process anyway. So that's not a problem. That's what you're here for, to learn.
Yeah, I agree with Marianne. I don't think that's something I would necessarily know about you. Before I choose a mentee, I will usually have one email back and forth with the perspectives. So that's really not enough for me, unless you completely say that you know absolutely nothing. I mean, in the end, it's all about the book, right? It's not. I'm not picking you for how knowledgeable you are about the industry or anything like that. It's just whether I think I can help that book.
Agree.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the willingness to learn part, though, is definitely key, and that will probably come through on some questions I might ask in an email.
Agreed.
All right, Nicole asks, what is the best way for a newbie to become involved in the Pitch Wars community, registering for the forums, any other tips?
I would just say spend some time on the Pitch Wars hashtag on Twitter. That's where I made a lot of connections when I was a prospective mentee. Just find somebody who is talking about their manuscript. Reply, make some friends. I think the community aspect is a huge part, and Twitter is where it was at for me.
Yeah, I'm gonna hard agree on that. Like, most people build out lists, they build out like Discourse servers just for folks who are thinking about applying, right? So people are really building community around folks that are even thinking about it. So check out Twitter, check out those hashtags, and people are, again, adding people to lists and creating communities around those hopefuls.
Yeah, and whatever way that you can connect, whether it's directly on the hashtag or if you can get into one of these communities, definitely reach out to other people and ask them if they want to swap pages. You may not get the greatest advice from it, so it's basically grain of salt, but what you'll get is you'll start having connections with people, and these might become good critique partners in the future. So this is how you start to build up. And it's a live and learn kind of process where somebody might not work out for you, but the more people you get involved with, the more likely you are to start to make the right types of connections with people who can critique your work the way you would want.
Yeah, and just seconding everything that's been said, and I really found a lot of friendship and camaraderie in the Pitch Wars hashtag, especially in the days leading up to submission. So I just recommend looking for other people who say that they write your genre, and people who are in the hashtag are usually pretty open. If you respond to their tweet or send them a DM and swap pages, do things like that, I think that that's sort of a great way to become involved in the community.
Yeah, I also wanted to add, keep an eye out for hashtag PWPO prompts, which will start after the submission window closes. It was originally started by 2017 mentee Adele Young, and now we've kind of formalized it. And so there's like a different prompt for each day for over a month. And it's specifically designed to let you share about your work and also to interact with each other. So that's a lot of fun. And it's also a good way to distract yourself while mentors are reading. All right. Okay. Joshua asks, are there any stories of past hiccups that we should avoid doing? And to further kind of generalize the question, like what kind of mistakes do you see newer writers making that you would like to maybe caution them against? I think we've heard don't self-reject like 8 times during this chat, but if you want to say it again, feel free.
That's a big one.
Yeah, definitely don't self-reject, but also I think pay attention to the mentor's wish list. If I I'm saying this very gently because it is the opposite of don't self-reject, but maybe self-reject if you know that the mentor had a hard no about a certain genre or story, because to be honest, I'm not looking to move outside of to accept something that I said is a hard no. Like I'm unfortunately not the mentor for romantic suspense. I just would not know what to do with that book. And every year I end up getting some.
Yeah. I think I can't think of anything in terms of a hiccup. I don't know if you mean technically or like substantively, but make sure you have your submission materials ready to go. Like if when you go to submit them, be very sure that what you're putting in is what you want to put in, because you only get the one chance. So don't make a mistake and then be like, oh no, I sent them the last version. And not that it's necessarily going to kill you, but
yeah, I will say we, because as someone who has to answer those emails, like we can't make changes. Like if we make a change for someone, it messes up like a lot of technical stuff. And so just double read your submission form before hitting enter, because we definitely see people copying their synopsis twice instead of the first chapter. And so just like double check and make sure you're not making those kind of easy to make mistakes.
And don't miss the last, like the window. Make sure you get your stuff in on time.
Yeah. And please don't wait until the last 2 hours to submit, because if there's a technical problem, then it gives me anxiety, and I'm not even submitting. All right. This is when all the previous mentors were leaving, so I have to scroll through all the goodbye. Okay. This question is for Nikki, but I'm going to ask all of y'all to answer, any of you that this applies to anyway, which I think is all of you. Once you had an agent, how was the submission process to getting a book deal like for you?
Wow. I am definitely not a typical case, right? This is a weird story. So for me, once I had an agent, I kind of went immediately on submission, and I was on submission for about 2 weeks, and I got like a lot of interest, and I had a deal like kind of within that time frame. And I would say that the number one thing that gave me a lot of help throughout this process were other Pitch Wars mentees, like going through the showcase, having a ton of questions. Like we built our own discourse community, asking these same questions, like how do I talk to people? What do I say? It was incredibly nerve-wracking, but again, I will also say probably wasn't a typical experience. So like, don't actually ask me, right? But what I did have was the benefit of the entire Pitch Wars community that made it so much more bearable.
I will say, shameless, selfish. There we go. That's the word. Selfish plug. I do have a podcast called Corey's Qualms and Quirks, where I interview authors about their journey from when they first start writing to the day of publication. Marianne is on there. Marianne has had an episode on there. And today's episode was Kelly Garrett, who, yes. And she actually talked about her first book was out on submission for a year before it sold. And then the most recent book she sold in 5 days. And she talked about the difference between those. So that was an interesting conversation. So if you want to hear more about that, I have like 24 episodes so far with authors in all different categories.
Submission is all over the place. My first book took 6 months, and then my next deal was a week, and then my next one after that was 2 weeks, but it was a preempt. So it's all over the place, and you have no way of knowing. Like, I thought that first one would sell really quickly, and it didn't, and it was really, really stressful. And I didn't have pitch wars. I'd never been a mentee, so I didn't have that community that I wish I had at the time, somebody to talk to and commiserate with for that 6 months when I was unsure. But it's persistence. I think there's a writing forum that calls the submission the next circle of hell, because writers spend so much time focused on getting their agent and thinking that's the hardest thing. And once they get the agent, then everything will be beautiful. And it's not. Like, there's still rejection even at this point in my career.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And submission is harder in some ways because there's so much more unknown. And you feel like you've overcome this giant hump, so you feel like it all should be easy, but then it's not.
Yeah, notably too, the episodes, Suzanne Park and Mike Chen both went on submission with multiple books that never ended up selling, and they both had books go to acquisitions that didn't sell. So it can be all over the place for sure.
Yeah,
Go ahead. There you go.
I kind of had experiences on both ends of the spectrum. My Pitch Wars book, actually, it died on submission. It didn't sell. But then my debut sold at auction within 2 weeks. And it was a proposal. So it's definitely, you can run the gamut, and it is unique each time you submit. So it's definitely not a one-size-fits-all approach.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say that I think the most surprising thing is that when you are querying, you have all this control, and you seem to get some feedback. Like, you at least get, you hear from agents eventually. But when you go in submission, you don't have any of that control anymore. It's like all on the agent side, and so you're dependent on them to pass you information, and that it's just a surprising sort of change in your the way that you're involved with that process. It's just a lot quieter.
Yeah.
Right. Short story is like, I don't think there is a typical journey, right?
You had something to add?
Oh, I was just going to say that my experience was, I think, a bit closer to Nikki's. I went out with my Pitch Wars manuscript shortly after signing with an agent. Within a week, I had a call with an editor, and I ultimately sold to them a few weeks later, once it was like the middle of summer in the pandemic. So once they had acquisitions meeting, and I think that the only reason that was possible for me personally was because my manuscript had gone through like what felt like 7 rounds of revision between Pitch Wars and then an agent R&R before I actually went on sub. And so I think I had like a pretty lucky experience.
Nice. All right. We have a question. What is your number one tip for preparing your manuscript in the weekish between now and the submission window?
I would say polish those first pages. I always like to be like donkey kicked in that first page, I definitely, it to me is the number one dive into the stakes, getting us to care about your character, getting us like deeply engaged. So like, of course, get your query, work on your query. But if you're like right at the edges and you're trying to polish things up, I would really focus on those first pages.
Yep.
I agree. I think work on your voice. Make sure that your unique voice is there in the first page. Some people just kind of have a lot of like backstory and info dump in the first page, and then I can't tell the author's unique voice in that beginning. So that's what I would focus on.
Yeah, I'd also add trust your gut. Like if you feel like there's this, one big plot hole that is really, harming the story and you have time to fix it, then like focus on fixing that. But if you're sitting there and you're like, I'm not really sure what I should work on, I'm not really sure what I should fix, then, work on polishing the first pages, work on polishing the query. When I was submitting, I actually realized like 4 days before that there was this like plot issue, but I also knew that if I wrote like 2 scenes, I could fix it. So I, instead of polishing my first few pages, was like frantically fixing this other thing that I had found, but that was because I had a very clear idea of what could be done. So if you have a gut feeling like, oh, I need to fix this chapter, or I need to like add these like sections of dialogue, then do that. But if you don't have a gut feeling, then work on the first pages, because that's what we're going to read and focus on.
I would say if you're going to make any really big changes, save a version of your manuscript as is, and then save as a new version. I know that I switched my Pitch Wars manuscript from, I think, 3rd to 1st within the last couple weeks before the submission window. So if you're going to make big changes like that, don't be overly ambitious and think that you don't need to save as a new version. Keep a version where you could submit it as is.
Those are some great tips, y'all. Thank you. Alexandria, you did make me a little nervous though, because I was like, when's the last time I backed up my manuscript? Like as soon as you said save and new. So back up your manuscript wherever you are.
Dropbox, man.
Yeah. Someone needs to hear it.
So we have a question that I can answer very quickly. It's just a rule question, procedural question. If we have a new adult title, can we submit to both young adult and adult mentors if we aren't sure? So we have 4 submission forms. So one is middle grade, one is young adult, one is adult, and one is new adult. And so if you click on the new adult form, you will be able to submit to young adult and adult mentors who are accepting new adult. But you won't be able to submit to young adult and adult mentors who aren't accepting new adult. So you just kind of have to make that decision for yourself, whether the new adult form is the best for you, or the adult or the young adult. All right, Alicia asks, I would love to know what each mentor's editing strengths are, things like plot, tension, romance.
Are those different?
Was it Marianne who sent? We were talking about Bridgerton, and you were like, I watched Bridgerton for the plot, and then sent a picture of the main character like licking a spoon.
Forearms is plot.
Forearms is my strength too. Add more forearms.
If you want to just go around the clock, maybe we'll start with Marianne and we'll go around.
Yeah, I like to look at structure. Structure is my thing. I love to read a good voice. I don't know how to tell you to have your voice, so that's an area. Some people say they can fix that. I am not that person, so I want to see voice, and then I want to be able to find structural issues that I can help you to navigate through and fix. So I guess plot.
So I'm not as great at structure, but my co-mentor is. So we work well together. I'm great at characterization. I'll immediately be able to pick out if I don't think a character would say something like that or would act that way. Your character arcs, I can help you make sure that your character has growth along the way. And then chemistry, because for the most part, we are looking for romance and women's fiction with romantic elements. So chemistry between your love interests, I'm really good at getting that longing on the page.
I would say, character consistency is something that's a strength of mine. Refining goal, motivation, conflict, GMC, internal wounds, fears, and false beliefs. So anything that ties into your character's internal self throughout the manuscript is a strength of mine. Pacing is actually a strength of mine. I'm better at working with pacing in other people's work than my own. I would say also amping up the tension and the chemistry between characters. If you have a manuscript that is potentially low on steam in romance and you're looking to make it open door, or enhance your sex scenes, I guess. That is a strength of mine, so I can also help you with that.
Nikki.
I'm sorry, I was just really feeling that. Like, I want to be mentored by you and
I know. I wish we could like go through this again with whatever our current draft manuscripts are. I consider myself to be pretty good at figuring out plot and pacing. So figuring out if there's lapses, what's driving the story, and I'm pretty good at finding voice inconsistencies. So I can't really help you find exactly what your voice is, but once I can tell what it is, I'm pretty good at finding places where it might have like slipped or lapsed and giving suggestions on how that can be tightened up. And I think Sarah is a really good compliment to me because one of my weaknesses is world building, and she's great at world building. She's helped me a lot with my own world building, and she's really good at characters and character arcs. So that's sort of what we bring all together.
I would say that characterization is a huge strength of mine. Like building real, breathable 3D people that can sit right next to you. It's always been a strength. Dialogue as well. It's also like I'm very interested in making sure the conversations like feel real and that these are real people talking. I would say for Regina, literally, we can be here until next Tuesday when we talk about Regina's strengths. But essentially, she's fantastic at structure and pace, and she has spreadsheets for her spreadsheets. It's like she will turn your book into an orderly thing that hits all the beats, and you will not guess. But she's also a ninja at dialogue and characterization. So I think that that both of us together, like you're gonna have characters that pop off the page and feel real.
Can I slide in? Just I keep remembering to mention your commenters, and I'm bad about that. Because Laura Elizabeth is amazing at voice. So even though that's not my thing, I mean, I'm not gonna be able to pick it out, but she can. So.
All right. Cynthia asks, what do you think about self-publishing if after the mentorship you still don't get an agent or get published? Obviously, this is like a very personal decision and depends on your goals and also your strengths and your motivation, how much money you have, how much time you have. It depends on a whole wide variety of things.
I would mainly say that if you're going to self-publish, it should be a decision you make, not necessarily a fallback. You should be going into it with your eyes wide open. It shouldn't just be a choice you make because you felt like you couldn't pursue traditional publishing. I just feel like it should be a choice. It should be a choice you make with goals in mind, because there is a lot of work involved, but it's definitely a valid choice and a path that a lot of authors find a lot of success with.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Alexandria. I think a lot of the amount of work and passion it takes to self-publish, I admire it so much. And if your end goal is to be traditionally published, and you're using self-publish, I was like, well, at least I can do something. I feel like you're not going to be able to really get passionate about that work and and do it to the best of your ability. I would almost, if your goal is to be traditionally published, I would almost advise instead to write another book. I think we can all think of people that we were just talking about, people whose books die on sub, or the first book they write is not the one that gets them the agent, or it's not the one that gets them the book deal or whatever. I think that that would be a better choice if your goal is to be traditionally published.
Yeah, and I would just add that in my Pitch Wars class, I know that there's several people who are pursuing hybrid, so they do have self-published work, and they're also pursuing traditional publishing, but I've mostly seen them, they are self-publishing in a particular genre, they're writing works for self-publishing because that's what they want to be doing. It's not really a fallback option. Sarah and I are here to support you in your career, however you want to do it, but I just agree with what's been said, that it's its own industry. It takes a ton of work. The people who do it are extremely talented. It is in no way like a fallback option or like the next step after if traditional publishing doesn't work out for a manuscript. And so that would be something we'd want to probably talk to you about.
Yeah, I think it does depend on what your eventual goals are, because one of the things that can happen is you might self-publish a book and then that book is out there and then the numbers are there, and that may actually make it harder for you to get your second book picked up. So it's definitely something you might want to consider if you're thinking about going traditional eventually, that writing a second book might be your stronger play. And you can always come back and self-publish that other book down the road, but it might not be the way you want to start out if that's not the way you intend to continue.
All right, yes. Okay, Sienna asked, when it comes to content warning, should we put them in our query letter or add a page at the beginning of the manuscript? So the way we've been answering this question on the Pitchwords account is, if what you're warning for is in the pages that are originally submitted, yes, definitely put it in your query letter. If it's later, you can either put it in your query letter or you can put it in the body of the email when you reply to requested materials. All right. I know it's not very typical to have the antagonist appear in the first chapter and the protagonist in the second. My gut tells me that it's the best way to present it, though. What are your thoughts on this?
Who was the antagonist is this, what type of story is this? Well, I guess it's not live, but yeah, I'm curious. Well, it depends on the structure, honestly. It's hard in romance to not introduce the lead and introduce someone who is not actually central to the two characters first. And
I will say in thriller, it's really common to have the antagonist in the first chapter, so it really does depend on the genre. You're right.
That's true.
Yeah, and in science fiction fantasy, it's not done a ton, but it's done and it works.
Oh, they're saying horror.
Horror. It could work great.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Not for romance. That's my advice.
Right. I'm like, who was the antagonist here? Right.
Although, have you ever read Tangled? Because the main character is like an anti-hero type, and I mean he's the only character, but yeah, he's a bad boy. So.
But is he the antagonist? Like the antagonist in a romance?
No, he's not
an inner demons or something. Yeah. It's like a conflict.
Yeah, that's good. Good job.
All right. I love this question every time. It's so fun. Which mentor would you submit to if you could?
On this panel?
Yeah.
Anyone.
These two right here who just said they could spice up my sex. these two ladies, come save me. Come save me. Okay.
I think my mentor is mentoring again this year, Sarah Remy. They're mentoring adult speculative. They're amazing. If I could be mentored by them again, I would do it in a heartbeat. So plug for Sarah.
That is a hard question because I feel like, I mean, everybody's got different strengths. I would look through obviously to see who would want my things if I was in your position to be looking for someone. But I mean, Farah, obviously, for romance would be excellent. Courtney from the last, Anna's great. I mean, anybody that is mentoring are all really great. So it's a tough question.
I feel like I needed to do some research for this question. I admit that I have not read every other romance writer's romance mentors wish list, so I don't know. There are some great romance mentors, though. There always are.
Yeah, Yeah, I don't know. I guess I would love to work with Ruby and Rosie. Ruby was just on the last panel, and Denise Williams is mentoring. I forgot who her co-mentor is, but
Denise would be amazing.
Yeah.
Denise was amazing. She mentored Regina, and Regina's a unicorn, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. It's always fun to hear the answers to that. Okay, Russ asks, is there somewhere on the forum info requested by mentors but doesn't go in the query? No, there's not. But do keep an eye out on the Pitchwords blog. I was trying to find a date for you, but I can't find my login to the Pitchwords blog right now. But there will be a post coming up within the next week that shows you exactly what you need for the form. So there will be there won't be any surprises. So yeah, just keep an eye out for that. All right. Well, this is a publishing kind of industry question, but if someone has a series out through self-publishing, how could one query in order to get the rest of that series published with an agent?
So I can jump in and say that as far as I know, in fantasy, it's not as common for sequels to get picked up unless the beginning of the series gets picked up. But I have seen in fantasy several people I know who self-published, and then their self-published first couple books got picked up, and then the rest of the series was continued with that same publisher. So it doesn't, it's not that it never happens, but I think usually the form it takes is that the whole series is picked up. And so that would be, a lot of times I think people are approached. So I'm not really sure how the query process would work, but I think you'd have to be open about that this isn't the first book in a series, that it's book number X, and I'm looking for the entire series maybe to be traditionally published now that it's out there.
Yeah, I think any situation like that I know of, they were approached. They weren't queried. I'm thinking again romance, but I'm thinking of the Ice Planet Barbarians that was just picked up by Berkeley, and they were Ruby Dixon was approached for that. As far as I know, it wasn't queried. But I think the book would have had to have done very well in indie publishing and self-published before a publisher will want to pick up, especially if they're going to pick up the later ones in the series. It would have had to have done really well in indie publishing.
Yeah, it's very, very, very difficult, and it does happen, but it's kind of like it happens, but it's not a plan. All right, so we don't really do word count questions, but I will, as soon as I get the mentors talking, I'll post a link that has information on a lot of different word counts, because it depends on the genre. So, okay. Okay. Alice, I don't know if y'all have a question. This is a hard question to answer. What puts a comedy in rom-com?
I love that question.
Oh, so do I. So do I. I'll just take a first stab at this. I love people in awkward situations. Like any kind of like fish out of water. I think comedy is situational, right? If you put a person that you've characterized in a certain way into a different milieu, there's a lot of breadth and like possibility for comedy, right? If you put a person who is underestimated and seen as someone who is unintelligent into like a Harvard law school, right? You can get Legally Blonde, right? And you can get a fantastic opportunity to first show a character arc, but also share opportunities where that fish out of water can create comedic scenes. So I love those types of opportunities.
So yeah. I have a theory on rom-com if you guys want to hear it.
Love to.
So obviously the romance part is very important. There must be chemistry between the characters. There must be a believable romance. You must buy that happily ever after, that they're going to have a happy, healthy relationship at the end. But I think for the comedy that people sometimes forget that neither the romance nor the comedy should take away from the other. So if a lot of times I will read something and the heroine is humiliated, or the heroine is maybe she makes a lot of really, really silly mistakes. And I think that takes away from my ability to respect her enough for me to buy into the HEA, the happily ever after at the end. So I think it needs to go both ways. I think the most important thing about the comedy part of rom-com is that the comedy doesn't take away from believing in the romance. And then the same thing for the romance. If the romance is too angsty or is too, I don't want to say too emotional, but you know what I mean? Like, this isn't dark romance. If the romance is too much, then it will take away from the ability, it won't match the tone of the comedic parts of it. So they need to balance each other.
For me, I think it has a lot to do with voice as well. The tone of a rom-com is a different voice than like a traditional contemporary romance. So there's just a different feel to it. Sort of like porn when you see it, rom-com when you see it. I mean, it's and like Farah said, it's got. I mean, there can be emotion, but I think the emotional center is kind of what you look at. Like the emotional center for a really serious book is going to be, heavier on the spectrum, and the rom-coms can be very light. There can still be emotion there. I'm not saying it shouldn't be emotional, but it's definitely not going to be like, you're not going to be crying at the end and be laughing.
I think for me, the comedy needs to drive the character arcs and the plot forward. And I look at comedy and rom-coms the same way that I look at sex scenes in romance, that they need to have a purpose, the comedic scenes. So if you could tear out the funny bits and still have a romance, then the comedy's probably not driving it forward. But if you have scenes where the humorous moments are driving the plot forward or driving the character arcs forward, that's the rom-com for me. It's not just a few lines of like witty banter, because you have that in a regular contemporary romance often, but it is tone for me as well. I think in rom-coms, I do like seeing it bringing the characters together rather than those moments where everyone just feels awkward and it's painfully awkward. I like awkward, but I like when there's the catharsis of it actually bringing the characters together, where they experience an awkward moment together and it actually brings them together in the long run.
All right. I did want to comment. I saw someone asked a question and then I skipped it. And in case you're wondering, the reason why I skipped it is I don't ask questions that comment on the appearance of the mentors. So just a heads up. I know it was like well-intentioned. It wasn't bad intention or anything, but I just don't ask it because I feel like it's uncomfortable. So if you want to re-ask your question without commenting on the appearance of the mentors, that would be great. All right. I wrote a manuscript and then realized that it almost reads like a narrated script. I know a lot of agents don't do screenplays. I'd say most agents don't do screenplays. Does this create a problem for me?
I guess what I would be curious to know is it meant to be a script? Like, is it meant to be a screenplay, or is it that it's meant to be a manuscript, like a book, and you want assistance sort of building it out and figuring out how to write the rest of it? That makes it feel less like a very maybe dialogue heavy manuscript and bring it more into the conventions of whatever genre you're writing in. I think that if it's the former, that it's intended to be a screenplay, then you probably need to be looking at people who represent screenplays and are in the TV and film industry. But if it's the latter, then that's something you can try to revise for or enter pitch wars to find a mentor to help with, and then query normal literary agents with a manuscript.
I would agree. It seems here like we have to determine like if you like it as a kind of narrated script and where to go from there, or if you're actually trying to do work to change it.
So they said, I didn't mean to make it a script, but the first person portion almost makes me think of a narrated portion of the beginning of a movie. Okay, it sounds like you have a manuscript then.
It sounds like a voiceover kind of narration, maybe.
Yeah.
It's really hard to say without seeing it.
It's really, it is.
Yeah. My go-to advice is always like read widely in your genre and see how yours compares to those. All right, so Regina asked a question that I can answer quickly because our mentors are not allowed to answer it. Our new mentors offering feedback for the top few choices after they pick their mentee. They are not allowed to say whether or not they will be offering feedback. They are not required to offer feedback to anyone. They are already giving hundreds of hours of their time, so we don't ask them to give more. And the reason why we say that they're not allowed to say is because a lot of people will submit to the mentors who are saying they are giving feedback, and then would make that task untenable for those mentors who said that. So, just a heads up. It's kind of like a tricky thing, but they're not allowed to say, and it's not their fault. It's our fault that they can't say that. All right. How do y'all feel about swearing?
Effing love it.
More.
I mean, obviously it depends person to person, but it seems like our panel today is in for swearing.
Well, adult books, so I think we can be adults about it.
Yeah.
Also in fantasy and sci-fi, if you like make up your own swears, I love that. I think Sarah loves it too, so down for it.
I need to do that in romance.
I love like Liz Lemon does that with she makes them all out of IKEA furniture.
IKEA furniture. That's good.
so
I love
funny.
that. I'm gonna use that. Mom.
One day I'm gonna use I played volleyball in high school and our coach hated swearing, and if we swore during practice, we had to take the number of letters in the phrase, double it, and run that number of laps. So we had so many, because like there was one especially, like you say son of a, and people started saying son of a biscuit eater. So one day I'm going to use those. All right, for romance mentors whose wish lists also include women's fiction with romance, would romance manuscripts necessarily trump one that is more women's fiction focused but has romance elements? I feel like you probably put this in your wish list if this is your situation, but if anyone wants to comment on that.
So yeah, we're looking at both romance and women's fiction, and the women's fiction technically doesn't have to have romance in it. It's on the wish list both, like either with romantic elements or without. I don't think one necessarily trumps the other. I write romance and Namrata writes women's fiction, so we might argue amongst ourselves about which one we like better. But I don't think I think we're looking for a strong voice more than anything. So yeah, it's not. Now I have always, so this is my first year with a co-mentor, and I've always had women's fiction on my wish list. And just so you guys all know, I've always picked romance. And that's not to say that I prefer it over the other. That's just the submission that worked best for me at the time, that I thought I could help the most. But I'm always looking at women's fiction as well.
Yeah, I would say I'm myself and Regina, we're looking for the story, right? And sometimes the genre, or determining where that genre fits in, if the story just like kicks our ass, then sometimes it's a little secondary. I know that I prefer to read romance, and but I love women's fiction at the same time, and so does Regina. So I think that, again, it's the story that we're interested in hearing.
And I'm not taking women's fiction.
Okay, then. All right. Okay, question from Ashish. Are certain genres like romance more likely than other genres in Pitch Wars? So I will say this. We choose our mentors and the genres that they take based on the amount of submissions we received in that genre in the previous year. And so if you see like a lot of mentors who are accepting a certain genre, it's because we get a lot of submissions in that genre. So we try to balance out the odds when it comes to genre with, of course, keeping with our focus on fiction. So the answer is no, but it's, what's the term? Not relative. It's, I can't remember the word right now. It's late, y'all. But yeah, it's that you will see some genres more than others, but relatively it's the same chance, basically. Subjective, I don't think that's the word I was looking for, but it's closer. Okay. I don't know. Okay. How do mentors feel about women's fiction with elements of seasoned romance? My life experience informs my writing, but those with different experiences may not be as interested in what appeals to me. Proportional. Y'all are right. That's the right answer.
Proportional.
Yeah. Sometimes those instances where where their life experiences informs or colors like a ton of their writing, sometimes that gives me pause, because that can create instances in which it's harder to indicate like what actually needs to happen, or give gentle information about how the story can be changed or shifted if they identify too deeply with the characters, or are less likely to kind of kill their darlings, right? So I'm not saying that's negative. I'm all about and this is not associated with it being a seasoned writing or a seasoned character. It's essentially over identifying with a character. And sometimes the challenge is with revising and reimagining a character that you have poured yourself into a little bit too much. But seasoned characters all day.
What's seasoned character? I'm trying to figure out.
Older.
Oh, yeah, that's not a problem for me. One thing I will say is that I know that I'm unusual. Not every mentor will do this, but I do look at market trends when I pick my mentee. My thing is that with the book I think I can help the most, and the book that I want to see on the shelves. And if that book I want to see it on the shelves because I absolutely loved it so much, or because I think it fits with whatever is going on in trends right now, or because I want to see that trope that's very popular right now with diverse characters or something like that. So I do look at trends, and so I'm not saying that seasoned romance wouldn't be something I wouldn't accept, but at the same time, I'm gonna pick someone that I think has the best chance of getting the agent and publishing deal, which is why we're here.
All right. We have a question about writing younger characters. Today is all adult mentors, but I did want to point out that tomorrow at noon Eastern, we have a young adult chat. So if you want to come back for that might be a better time to ask this question. But what tips would you offer for writing believable younger characters, striking a balance between maturity and still enjoying childhood or early teenhood? Any thoughts on that?
I can jump in because I think in fantasy it's sometimes common, even in adult fantasy, to have a younger protagonist or a protagonist, as in my debut novel, who starts out young. My character starts out at 12, and the first entire part, like the first section of the book, is her from 12 to 17. But then she is an adult for the rest of the story. And I think that if that's your situation, like you're writing an adult manuscript, but there's periods of time where the character is younger, I think writing in a voice that sort of strikes a balance with where the character is going, but feels younger. So I think what I struggled with at least was just at first I was writing like sort of two different voices. Like there was a young voice and an old voice, and they felt different. And trying to find what's common about the character, what's like the kernel of them that remains there, and making sure that's woven through. And I think that'll bring in some of the maturity even when they're a child, and then make them understandable and legible to the reader once they're an adult.
Awesome. That's some great advice. Okay. Brittany asked, what is the most popular genre submitted? It is young adult fantasy. By far, like it's not even a competition. A lot of people think it's because like our most successful book was young adult fantasy, but it was that way even before Children of Blood and Bone. So it's always been that way, I guess. All right. So we've gone through all the viewer questions. There was a question from earlier. I wanted to go back and ask y'all that we asked with the first set of mentors. Oh, let me find it. Sorry. All right, yeah. So for books with a kind of slower start, what recommendations do you have for pitching them in Pitch Wars?
So I listened in on the first panel, so I know some of what was said, and I agree with a lot of that. But I wanted to say that for me, if you have like really compelling writing, like if the writing draws me in. Obviously, you want to have all the other, things that pull you through in terms of what's happening in the story. But the voice itself can sometimes grab me so much that I'm not even aware that it's like slow or anything, because I'm so like lost in the voice.
Yeah, I agree 100% with Marianne. My first instinct when Sarah said the question, I was like, well, speed up the start then. If it's slow, then make it better. But then I actually stopped and thought about it. And my first mentee, the first thing on the edit letter I gave her was, we need to delete the first chapter because it wasn't going anywhere and it was too slow. And I still picked her out of 150 submissions. So that tells you that it doesn't really matter that much. If the if the query draws me in and the voice draws me in and the story draws me in, then that's important. The voice is super important, the quality of the writing, and a slow start is one of the things that I would be willing to fix in the revision period.
I would say that if a prospective mentee can notice that their manuscript has a slow start, I would ask if they're starting it in the right place. Maybe give it a hard look and see if you're starting at that moment right before everything changes. Not dumping the reader right into a very tense moment, but just that moment, like the calm before the storm. Are they making active choices on the page, or are they just kind of watching the world around them? So yeah, just kind of seeing if you are starting in the right place, or if you could, start it a little bit later. But that wouldn't be an automatic no for me if the voice was there, if the voice was strong, and I could see it heading in the right direction.
Yeah, I agree with what everybody's saying, and I guess I just have two very quick things to add. One is that I think every genre has a different definition of what it means to have a slow start. So I think that there's different conventions, and I think examining what starts are like in your particular genre, what the first act looks like, and then comparing yourself to that rather than just like a very general idea of what it means to start slow could be helpful. And I know this goes against some query advice, but I actually think it's okay for your query to go a little beyond that like first twist or first big conflict. When my query contained plot elements all the way up to the midpoint, actually, and it worked fine because my beginning is like slower. It's building a lot of the world because it's fantasy, and so I definitely think it's okay if you need to do that, but it might also be something that we as mentors want to work on if we think that it's not serving the purpose of the story.
Oftentimes with slow starts, sometimes, I know this was the case for me, I was telling myself the story, right? When you're like starting off, you're getting to know and settle into the story yourself. And sometimes it feels really, really necessary when you're writing that first story. And then that's part of what it means to mentor, is to now prepare the mentee to tell that story to other people.
Oh, that's really nice, Nikki. That's really beautiful. I like that.
Oh, yeah, that's great.
All right, so Al asked a question about pen names. We're not going to go into too much time because we're pretty much out of time. He said, have you ever considered or mentored someone that considered using a pen name? If yes, what was the rationale and pros and cons? And I actually have like a 7-minute video on choosing a pen name. So I'm just going to post that. I have long hair, so you may not recognize me, but because I covered that quite a bit. And that, but yeah, I think there are a lot of people who use pen names in Pitch Wars, mentees and mentors. I do. I know Marianne does. I don't know about the rest of you, but yeah. So pen names are pretty common, especially in romance, but all over the place.
Yeah.
All right. So the last thing I'm going to ask each of you to do is give your, your best query letter tip, and then also let people know where they can find you online.
Me?
Yeah, we'll go around the circle.
Okay. I'm at Marianne Marlowe on Twitter, Mary_Ann_Marlowe on Instagram. I think I'm Marlowe Marianne on Facebook because I got to keep it all fresh. My best tip for a query letter is, and fortunately not a lot of people do this, but when you write your query letter, make sure you're like showing the story to us. You're not doing this sort of thing where you're like, this is a book about family. That's not going to really give us a sense of what your book is. So make sure, like, read a lot of queries, like read a lot of back cover copy, read a lot of like, if you can find like maybe Query Shark or somewhere and read other people's queries and how they're doing it. There's a certain way that a query is structured. So again, not a lot of people do that, but every year I get a few people that send me this whole thing telling me what the book is, and it doesn't really tell me what the book is, ironically.
I love that advice. Definitely my advice would be to keep your query letter professional, but at the same time, the blurb on the query letter should match the voice of the book. So many times I will read a query that has this great rom-com-y voice, and then the page doesn't have it, or the other way around, where the query is very dry and professional sounding, and then the book is very has 3 swear words on the first page. And I'm not saying you should swear in your query, because professional is also important, but the tones should match. And then my other advice would be to workshop your query, get somebody else's eyes on it. And you can even ask people on the Pitch Wars hashtag if anyone's willing to take a look at it beforehand. And then where to find me? I'm Farah Heron on Twitter, Farah Heron Author on Instagram. I'm on TikTok, but I'm really bad at it. But it's Farah Heron Author there as well. And Sarah got really excited there. And then
I'm like picking up my phone to follow you.
I'm so bad at it. I'm trying to get better. We should do Pitch Wars for like people to mentor us on how to do TikTok.
I need that.
That's necessary.
I need a mentor for TikTok. And then
we should just have Dante teach a class, because she's killing it. About Dante Medema.
Yeah, she's good on. I think I follow her on TikTok. And that's me.
Cool. Alexandria?
My query tips would be specific and don't forget stakes. I think the most important thing in a query for me is make me care about your characters and their conflict. Obviously, your character's motivation is why they care about what they're going through, but make me as the reader care about it as well. And where to find me, I am on Twitter at @Bellefleur. I'm also on TikTok at the same handle, but I don't have any videos because I am afraid of TikTok. And I'm also on Instagram. I'm not afraid of Instagram, at a.m.bellefleur.
I agree with what everyone has said. I think for me with a query, a really important tip is to make sure that it ends somewhere I'd want to be like, oh, I have to read the pages. So I've read queries that end in what feels like a column spot. I'm like, okay, great. I know where these characters are. Like, I don't feel a sense of urgency to go on. And so if you can make that sense of urgency, I think that's really useful. And you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Vaishna Writes. So it's my name minus the VI Writes. And I'm not on TikTok because I am afraid of it.
I see a opportunity for like TikTok mentorship here. This is great. Not by me. My query advice is to actually like gather community. So it's just like double clicking on what Farah said. If querying is not your strength, then querying isn't my strength. But my strength is actually community and just like making sure that I'm shopping this around, so that people can see and look and see if I'm actually getting those things right. So gather community. Don't lean on your own understanding. It's not that it's not that like tough to just kind of grab someone and say like, can you take a look at this? And for social media, I am Nikki Payne 14 on Twitter. Twitter is my preferred. I am on Instagram, but I think I'm like _ Nikki Payne _, but I'm not sure on Instagram. Like, I'm very terrible at Instagram. I'm also on TikTok for Nikki Payne Writes, or I'm not doing this well. But I'm also on TikTok, but I am not entirely sure what the handle is. That's how often I go to my TikTok. But I have a site, Nikki Payne Books, and a newsletter. And it's pretty funny. So sign up if you want to joke around. And that's it.
All right, and we do have a spot on the Pitch Wars forum to get feedback on your query. If you're brave and you want to post it there, I'll put a link in the description. And I'm Sarah. Thank you all for joining us. I just wanted to give a quick shout out to my podcast, Queries, Qualms, and Quirks, where authors discuss their journey from first spark to day of publication. So I've had like, I think 12-ish Pitch Wars people on there. And the rest of you are invited to come on if you want to. So yeah, I just put a link there. And thank you all. Everyone stay safe. We'll see you next time. If you're a young adult, we'll see you tomorrow at noon. And bye, y'all.